The Tesla Model Y is a cross between the Model X and the Model 3. When we reviewed the latter on the channel back in 2020, it was and still is the most efficient all-electric saloon on the market. So in this review, we're going to be seeing how the Model Y, which starts from £55,000 in the UK, competes with its smaller sibling, and indeed how it stacks up to the competition. So let's kick off this review and talk about range, because that was one of the key selling points of the Model 3, and I'm pleased to say that the Model Y is no slouch. Now, the long-range model is claimed to have an 82 kilowatt-hour battery pack, at least the newer variants of the Model Y. And that's very similar, if not identical, to the Model 3 long range and performance. Now, in our mixed driving test, we attained roughly 260 to 280 miles, which is certainly impressive. Now, let's put that in perspective. The Model 3 long range attained roughly 310 miles. The Skoda Enyaq iV80, although the single motor variant of it, attained 300 miles. You can expect a little bit less range if you go for the dual motor configuration and making it a bit more of a comparable equivalent to the Model Y long range that we have on review. Then the likes of the VW ID4, the Hyundai Kona Electric, the Kia Soul EV and the Kia e-Niro all attained roughly 260 miles, and the same could be said about the Jaguar I-Pace. Further down from that, the BMW iX3, the standard range or the entry-level Model 3, attained 230 to 250 miles. And then the larger Audi e-tron attained around 180 to 200 miles. What we're trying to convey over here is that the Model Y does a really good job. And better still, the model that we have on review has the 20-inch rims fitted. So as a result, if you go for the 19-inch rims, you might attain closer to that 300-mile mark. And as a result, if you are going to be concerned about range and less about its looks, then you might want to consider the smaller rims instead. Now, better still, you do also have access to the fantastic Tesla supercharger network. And this is not only convenient when it comes to going out and about, because you can do route planning, but it also takes away the range anxiety. The infotainment system links with the battery and gives you an indication as to the remaining battery you'll have when you get to your destination. You can easily see the superchargers which are en route and or close to you by a touch of a button. And furthermore, given the fact that you do have great efficiency and range thanks to its battery pack, it means that range anxiety is pretty much a non-issue, at least in my opinion. I'd be intrigued to hear your thoughts as to how important you think the charging infrastructure is when it comes to purchasing an electric vehicle. Now, of course, I should talk about the amount of charge that one can attain. And here the Model Y is capped at a 210 kilowatts. I say capped because some of its competitor offers more. Now, nevertheless, connected up to a V3 supercharger, you can go from 0 to 80% in a mere 20 minutes. Opt for a V2 supercharger, therefore being capped at 150 kilowatts, you'll attain the same level amount of charge in roughly 30 minutes, which isn't too bad to say the least. Now, it is worth bearing in mind that if you do not have access to a Tesla supercharger and you find a regular motorway charger which is capped at 50 kilowatts, it'll take roughly 1 to 1.5 hours to attain 80% of charge. Now, if we were to go to a home or workplace charger which has 3-phase power supply, the Model Y supports an 11 kilowatt input, and therefore means that going from 0 to 100% takes around 7 hours. If you were to go for a 7 kilowatt and therefore a non-3-phase power supply, it'll take roughly 11 hours. And of course, if you go for a 3-pin socket, it'll take in excess of 33 hours to charge to full. Aside from plugging it in, you can of course re-attain energy back into the battery pack via regenerative braking. Now, the mode that I love through the infotainment system is hold mode, and this does retain, as the name might suggest, it does hold its previously used mode, so therefore you don't have to each time step inside the vehicle and tap on this setting, which is not the same that could be said about some of its competitors. Likewise, you do have the ability to drive with one pedal only. There's no vehicle behind me, so as I just lift off the accelerator pedal, you can see here I come to a complete standstill, which is fantastic. Now, the thing I don't like, however, is that Tesla did remove the ability to customize the regenerative braking level. Yes, you do have creep and hold, but when it comes to different levels of regenerative braking, you don't don't have the ability to go on, let's say, a medium regenerative braking level, whereby on the likes of the Kia EV6 or the Hyundai Ioniq 5, which are really class leading in this department, you have the ability to customize it on the fly via the use of flappy paddles and or going via the infotainment system to choose your preferred mode. We wish that Tesla would have retained this because it used to be present on the Model 3 infotainment system on older firmware versions, and it's a shame that Tesla still hasn't gone back to its roots, in other words, to provide that option to its consumers. With battery and efficiency out of the way, was very much intrigued to see how the Model Y would compare to the Model 3 when it came to straight line speeds. Now, both the Model Y and the Model 3 long range models that we had tested did not have the acceleration boost enabled, which can be purchased for an initial £2,000 in the UK and around $2,000 in the US. It brings it closer to the performance model in case you're interested, be it later down the line or indeed when you're just first purchasing it. Nevertheless, here from 0 to 60 miles an hour, we had the Model Y long range tested at 4.86 seconds, which is certainly rapid to say the least. Now, just by comparison, the Volvo XC40 Recharge Twin did do a little bit of a better job at 4.51 seconds, while the Model 3 long range dual motor without the acceleration boost, as I just mentioned, had it tested at 4.41 seconds. Nevertheless, what I'm trying to say over here is that the Model Y's dual motor configuration is certainly going to bring your head back to the headrest and give you that exhilarating driving experience. Now, it should be mindful here that the motor configuration is claimed to have an output of 340 kilowatts, which equates to around 450 horsepower, and also gives you around 630 newton meters of readily available torque. I say claimed because there's no official quotation from Tesla itself, and therefore I'm just going based on sources that I could find on the internet. So with its straight line speed out of the way, what about when it comes to its handling characteristics? Well, first off, I do have to talk about the driver's input, and here it can't quite compete with the likes of the Jaguar I-Pace or the BMW iX3, but it's certainly better than the likes of the Kia e-Niro, the Kia Soul EV, or the Hyundai Kona Electric. It somewhat sits in between, and the same could have been said about the Model 3. Now, as for the overall grip that you get and confidence when you're driving around windy country roads, well, here the Model Y is not a problem whatsoever because its all-wheel drive system gives you plenty of confidence and is far superior than rear-wheel or front-wheel drive systems that you can find out there with rival SUVs. Here the BMW iX3, despite it having a great sort of driver's feel, doesn't quite compete with the Tesla Model Y. I'm truly impressed with the overall drive system that Tesla has offered. Now, moving on from that, I should also point out that the suspension setup of the Model Y is a little bit stiff, at least for a family SUV, whereby you'd effectively imagine that it's going to have a soft suspension setup. That's not quite the case. Indeed, here you hear the potholes, you can feel them, and the anomalies on the road can definitely be felt. There's also a little bit of reverberation that can be heard at the front of the cabin. I do talk about cabin noise in my audio review, so do check that out in case you're interested. Now, here what I will say is that the suspension setup is a little bit stiffer in comparison to the Volvo XC40 Recharge Twin Pro and the Skoda Enyaq iV, whereas it's not as stiff as the Ford Mustang Mach-E, and nor is it as soft as the likes of the adaptive air suspension systems that can be found in the larger Audi e-tron. What I'm trying to say over here is that it is a little bit stiffer even in the all-electric SUV market, and I think people, given the fact that you're going to be potentially driving this in a variety of different conditions, might find that the actual suspension setup is not too bad. It's worth bearing in mind that we do have the 20-inch alloys, so potentially if you do want to try and reduce this sort of feel on the road, you might want to opt for the 19-inch alloys again. Now, on that note, I would be very much intrigued to hear your thoughts in terms of the driver's position. Now, I'm just under 6 foot, so I've got no issues whatsoever, but if I was 6'2" or potentially 6'4", 6'7", I think I would struggle to find the right sort of driver's position, and that's because the seat is somewhat locked. It can't go any further lower, whereas in the Model 3 or the Polestar 2 or the BMW i4, even though these are saloon-based vehicles, you do get a much better sort of driver's position, therefore allows you to see in front of your windscreen a lot easier. Similarly here, the likes of the Volvo XC40 Recharge Twin did also have that issue, whereas the BMW iX3 didn't have that problem whatsoever, which ironically is an iX3 just passing us right in front of us. So here the iX3 did provide a much better sort of driver's position, and again meant that if you're a bit of a taller individual, you won't have a problem having the right sort of driver's position. Now this perfectly leads us onto cabin noise, and here the Model Y isn't as serene as its smaller sibling, the Model 3. Equally, the BMW iX3 and the larger size Audi e-tron provide a little bit more of a quieter in-cabin experience. In fact, if you want a bit more details, do check out our dedicated audio review that can be found up on your pod banner, down description below, or indeed in the pinned comments. Now, this also brings us on to the audio system, and thankfully Tesla has preserved the fantastic premium audio system that can be found within the Tesla Model 3 long range and performance within the Model Y. And here, what I will say in a nutshell is that it's absolutely phenomenal and arguably class leading for an all-electric SUV. So what about when it comes to comfort? Well, I should firstly touch upon that the Model Y, at least at the time of filming, and in the UK, is only available as a 5-seater, while in the US and in certain markets it can also be found as a 7-seater, which actually makes it pretty unique when it comes to the all-electric SUV market. Nevertheless, all these seats themselves are very comfortable. They are very accommodating as well, and no problems be it at the front or at the rear of the cabin. Better still, they're all heated, and yes, that also includes the rear middle seat, which is quite a rarity. I should also point out that here at the rear middle seat you do also have a retractable headrest. And why is this incorporated? Well, Tesla have actually designed this pretty well so that if there's no one sitting in the rear middle seat, the driver can peer over to the rear view window and not be obstructed by the headrest. A small little touch, but one that's definitely appreciated, at least when it comes to driving and also visibility. We'll touch upon the latter further down in this review. So moving swiftly on, headroom and legroom both at the front and rear of the cabin are excellent. You get a real sense of spaciousness when you're sat inside the Model Y, which isn't the same thing that could be said about the Model 3 or the likes of the BMW i4 or Polestar 2, which just feel a little bit more crammed in. The only thing I should mention over here is that the rear middle occupant might feel a little bit more hemmed in because headroom is a little bit more limited, but given the fact that you have a rear flat footwell design, it means that they can fully extend their legs or completely spread them out if they so wish. The thing I really like over here is that Tesla have incorporated a fully panoramic glass roof, which makes it great for your rear occupants in order to gaze out into the stars and of course to draw in some extra light within the cabin. Better still, it has got UV protection, so you don't have to be worried about getting a suntan while sat inside the cabin. So moving on to storage, the Model Y offers plenty of space within the cabin. The door bins are large enough for a 500ml bottle alongside some valuables, and if you do want to hide your goods from prying eyes, you do have the glove compartment, and better still, you can even set yourself a pin, which adds an extra layer of security. Elsewhere, towards the center console, you have got the middle armrest compartment, which opens up and is large enough for a small to medium sized purse and or a wallet. And here you'll also find a 12-volt socket, which can be useful for charging and or a dash cam. Further down the center console, you do also have a retractable small storage bay, and here you'll also find two Type-C ports, which are for charging. And on the notion of charging, let's say a smartphone, you do have wireless charging bays that are found towards the front of the center console. Now, as for your cup holders, in case you want to take a coffee or tea on the go, you do have a set found towards the center console and a further two within the retractable rear armrest. Now, of course, when we talk about storage, we have to talk about the boot. Now, it can be operated via a button found on the infotainment system, through the app, or via a physical button found just above the number plate. Now, what you'll note over here is in comparison to the Tesla Model 3, it's got that hatchback design where the boot lid itself opens up pretty wide, and as for someone who's just under 6 foot, I've got no issues whatsoever accessing goods at the rear of the vehicle. Now, better still, you've got 854 litres of usable capacity and 2,100 litres when the seats are dropped down. Note here, it's worth bearing in mind that we normally quote the overall figure with the parcel shelf that's included, but of course in the Model Y there is no rear parcel shelf, and therefore the figure will sit quite higher. What you should know in practical terms is that it's large enough and will compete with the likes of the Skoda Enyaq iV, which is quite class leading, and similarly the larger sized Audi e-tron. Now, elsewhere, Tesla has incorporated a large underfloor compartment area and also included two side compartments which are pretty large. Better still, it's got a flat loading bay with a 40-20-40 split, which comes as standard. This makes it quite convenient if you want to take elongated goods, and similarly, if you do want to drop the seats, there is a button found towards the rear boot, which makes it quite convenient when you're loading in and out goods from the rear of the vehicle. Now, being built on an all-electric platform, Tesla has also incorporated front storage, whereby it's also referred to as frunk. Here you've got 117 litres of usable space, which is far superior than the likes of the Tesla Model 3 or other all-electric SUVs. The only thing worth bearing in mind, however, is that in order to use it, you're going to have to use the app or the infotainment system, in other words, to release the latch, and when it comes to closing it, you're going to have to close it manually. Therefore, it's not as practical as the fully electric tailgate, and makes it potentially a little bit more redundant when you're going to be using the Tesla Model Y on a day-to-day basis. Now, on the subject of using the infotainment system as a means of unlocking the frunk, we should also mention technology. Now, here Tesla incorporate a horizontal 15-inch display, which is plenty responsive and vivid. It is arguably the best infotainment system out there on the market. However, one should note that Android Auto and Apple CarPlay are not supported both in a wired or wireless format, which is a certain disappointment for those people who do like using those third-party operating systems. Thankfully, when it comes to navigation, it uses Google Map data and therefore gives you some accurate routes, and therefore allows you to find the best supercharger to go to, and or if you're going to set destination. As for the infotainment system, given it's really well laid out, it's very intuitive to access your climate controls or your media settings, and allows you to also play some games or watch some YouTube, which is a great inclusion and therefore makes the 15-inch display a real centerpiece. Now, this does have its pros and cons, whereby Tesla have gone over the minimalist route, very much like the Tesla Model 3, and therefore even your speedometer and the safety systems will be appearing on this 15-inch display. Now, as a result, means that you don't have an instrument cluster, nor do you have a head-up display. We do feel the latter is somewhat of a missed trick, because Tesla could have offered it as standard, and or at the very least as an option for those people who want to keep their eyes planted on the road rather than having to constantly glance down at the infotainment system in order not to be speeding and or to see any of the safety systems which are in operation. Now, as with any Tesla, you do also have access to the app, which provides a great degree of flexibility, from keyless entry, remote climate controls, or even security with the use of the live view camera and sentry modes, which provides you a little bit of extra peace of mind when you're away from the vehicle. There's also the summon feature, which might not feel that useful in the UK or Europe because of regulations, meaning you have to be very close to the vehicle, but it can still serve a purpose. If you're parking in a tight space whereby there's a wall on one side, and or you're in a garage, or for example if you're disabled, it provides a means of moving the car without actually being in the car, and this is quite handy. Now, this is only available if you opt for the enhanced Autopilot option, and this comes in at a whopping £3,400. On that note, the Model Y doesn't use the falcon wing design of the Model X, and indeed over here has the same sort of doors and the door handles as the Model 3. Now, this does take a little bit of getting used to, and of course isn't as intuitive as the likes of the Hyundai Ioniq 5, whereby its handles prop out of the shell of the vehicle. Nevertheless, when you get the hang of it, it becomes second nature. What we really do like, however, is that when you are inside the cabin and you're trying to get out of the vehicle, the door release mechanism is very intuitive. Now, moving on to its design, it's purely subjective, but we think it looks pretty good. It's almost like the Model 3 and Model X decided to have a baby and they called it the Model Y. Now, at the side, we do have 20-inch rims fitted, which come in as an option, but as standard you do get the 19-inch rims. They don't look as appealing, at least not in our opinion, but of course this might be somewhat of a non-issue, specifically when range and comfort are concerned. Now, I did say I'd talk about visibility, and I haven't forgotten. At the front, the bonnet is very easy to peer over and gives you a better spatial awareness over the Model 3 that has slightly flared wings. Now, as for the side, it's fantastic because you've got very large windows, but unfortunately, much like the Model 3, you still do have relatively chunky A-pillars, and as a result, when you're taking a corner or going around the roundabout, for example, you'll definitely want to double check around the A-pillars to make sure you're not going to hit a pedestrian or a cyclist that you might not have noticed. On the subject of noticing potentially your surroundings, the rear view window is quite limited in terms of visibility, and yes, that also includes when you drop atop the rear middle headrest. Thankfully, however, Tesla have incorporated fantastic high-resolution cameras, which you can access through the infotainment system at any given point, thanks to the widget, and or each time when you pop into reverse. Here you've got a great sort of view of the vehicle, and furthermore you can check your left and right sides, so therefore make sure that you're either too close or too far from the curb and prevents you from curbing your wheels. Now, the use of cameras don't actually stop there, because if we pop into drive and I were to put on the indicator, you'll be able to see that the blind spot monitoring system also incorporates the side view cameras. And this to me is a fantastic inclusion. I actually can't believe it's taken this long for Tesla to integrate it, but it has come along and it's great to see. The only thing I would say over here is that the positioning of the camera is at the lower portion of the screen. So therefore, when you're driving and you have your hands, it might take away from your line of vision, and therefore means it's not as handy if the lens or the camera, shall we say, the view of it was either at the top or towards the side over here, or even blown up fully where the map would be. Suffice to say, it's still great to see its inclusion, and it's nice that the firmware update has brought this to every Tesla Model 3, Model Y, S and X owner. So what about when it comes to its safety? Well, here the vehicle hasn't been tested, at least at the time of filming, by Euro NCAP, but one can only imagine that it will attain a full 5 out of 5 stars. The reason I say that is because it's been tested by the US government agency, the NHTSA, and it attained full-blown marks, which means that here the Tesla Model Y will survive a really harsh impact, and means that if you're going to be in a serious accident, you and your family members will be left secure, which is always a definite selling point. Now, what I can test is the driver assistance systems, and here the Tesla Model Y is seriously impressive. As standard, you've got forward and side collision assist, emergency brake assist, and also cruise control. This also has stop and go technology, and furthermore has got a speed limiter. All of this combined does make for a better driving experience when you're on the motorway. Now, should you want to better the experience, you can go for the advanced Autopilot at £3,400. This brings self-driving navigation, auto lane change, and auto park, all of which are appreciated in their own testing environments. There is of course the summon feature that we talked about before, whereby in Europe and the UK you're somewhat limited, although in those countries like in the US it means that you can actually summon the Model Y from afar. Now, if you want to take things one step further, you can opt for the full self-driving package, FSD for short. It comes in at a whopping £6,800, and at the time of filming it only really adds traffic light stop-start technology, whereby the vehicle recognises when there's a red or green light. Nevertheless, here FSD is aimed for those people who are intrigued and fascinated and want to invest in the autonomous driving experience. Here Tesla is really pioneering this segment, and for a vehicle that can offer it, it just means that you're going to be at the forefront of any of the latest developments and the technologies offered via firmware updates. And so this brings us on to our verdict. The Tesla Model Y is effectively a larger size Model 3. While it compromises the overall driver's position and the range, it does make up for the overall spaciousness that one can attain. As a result, it's a fantastic all-electric SUV, specifically given the overall tested range that we attained, and as a result gets our Best Buy award. Now, you should of course consider some of the alternatives. The Volvo XC40 Recharge Twin offers you fantastic driving dynamics and good range at an affordable price. Then you've got the Jaguar I-Pace and the BMW iX3, which come in at a steeper price point, but do offer you the best sort of driver's feel, at least when it comes to an all-electric SUV. The likes of the VW ID4, the Hyundai Ioniq 5 and the Kia EV6 all offer some compelling alternatives as well. Then you've got the Skoda Enyaq iV, which provides you class-leading boot capacity and also comes in at a cheaper price than the likes of the Model Y. This would be our top pick for those people who want a family-sized SUV. Then you have got the likes of the Kia e-Niro, the Hyundai Kona Electric and the Kia Soul EV, which I appreciate won't give you the same sort of performance, driving dynamics, nor the overall boot capacity as the Model Y, but they're great alternatives which come in at roughly £20,000 cheaper than the Tesla vehicle. Suffice to say, you've got a lot of alternatives, and we'd be intrigued to hear your thoughts in a comment section below. Now, if you've liked this independent detailed review, definitely do consider dropping a like, subscribing and hitting that bell notification if you haven't already. As such, I've been Chris from TotallyEV, and I'll hopefully see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves, and goodbye.